Hey, my name is George McCain, and I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. I did my research on the Scopes trial. First part, I want to talk to you about exactly what the Scopes trial was, and then I'm going to use 3 newspaper articles from the 1925 Scopes trial to read some quotes to you concerning fundamentalism, modernism, liberalism. All right, what was the Scopes trial? Back in 1925, the state legislature in Tennessee passed a law stating that it would be illegal to teach evolution in Tennessee high schools, that they had to teach creation as it is taught in the book of Genesis. The person who initiated that law, his last name was Butler, and so that law was known as the Butler Act of 1925. The ACLU was just now getting started. The ACLU, that stands for American Civil Liberties Union, disagreed with that law, and they wanted to fight it. They placed an ad in newspapers throughout Tennessee saying they wanted to fight it, and they were looking for help. Basically they were looking for a biology teacher to stand up and say, yeah, I taught it, and then allow themselves to be arrested, and so they have a way to take it to court. Well, there was a businessman from Dayton, Tennessee, a little small town, and he was hurting financially as well as most of the town. He read that article, and he got to thinking, said, man, a big trial like this in our little town could bring in a lot of people and bring in a lot of money and could help us out financially. So he took that idea to the Dayton, Tennessee Chamber of Commerce. They liked the idea. They approached their football coach at their local high school. His name's John Scopes. He was like a full-time football coach and part-time teacher. He had taught a total of 2 weeks of biology. Could not remember if he'd ever taught evolution or not. And they said, that's okay. You taught out of a science book that teaches evolution, you'll work. And so the trial got set up. Basically, as it'll be pointed out in one of my newspaper articles, that John Scopes was just a pawn for the ACLU to take this to court. They had to have a person to use, and that John Scopes was the person. 2 key people, 2 attorneys, one representing the state. His name was William J. Bryan. He was a 3-time presidential candidate, world-renowned orator, and very known devout Christian. The person representing the defense, representing John Scopes, was Clarence Darren, and he was a world-renowned lawyer and agnostic. Okay, so those are 2 key people. The trial is about to be underway. Newspaper reporters are all over the little town of Dayton, Ohio. Excuse me, I keep saying Ohio. All over Dayton, Tennessee. And first article here, this article here was written actually a few days before the trial started. The trial went from July 10th through the 21st, 1925. This article here that I'm fixing to quote from was written July 7th. And it starts out by saying that when William J. Bryan arrived in town on the train, there were over 300 people there waiting on it. This was big time news for them. They're having this big trial. The great Christian orator, 3-time presidential candidate, William J. Bryan, was representing the people who believe in God. And there were 300 of them that showed up, including about 50 people from the press. Got a lot of quotes here. Don't have enough time to read all of them, so I'm going to try to focus on just the ones that use the terms, that we've been studying about: fundamentalism, modernism, liberalism. The first thing I'm going to point out is that Bryan said that this was the Scope trial was going to be a duel to the death. I think this is important. There was a very real earnestness in Mr. Bryan's voice as he sat in the Hicks Law Office later correcting his speech. He'd already arrived in town, he was in a law office, and he was preparing his speech. He looked with determination over his glasses and, pencil in hand, pronounced against the stupidity of scientists. And this is the quote: "Why, these men would destroy the Bible on evidence that would not convict an habitual criminal or a misdemeanor." Then he goes on to talk about the silliness of the one tooth and the Nebraska deal and all that kind of stuff. Then in the article, he uses the term fundamentalist here. He goes, the fundamentalist will carry the war on evolution into every state in the Union and to every mission field on the globe. Modernism and Mammon have joined hands against Christ and the Bible, and the fight is on to the finish, he continued. This next article, and this is dated actually the day before the trial started. This is dated July 9th. The trial actually started on the 10th. And it opens up talking about how John Scopes really isn't what this is about. And my print on here is really small. I couldn't get it to print to enlarge, so I've got my nifty magnifying glass here, so I'm going to use it, and I'm going to quote this here. It's pretty neat. It starts out, Dayton, Tennessee, July 9th. The nerves of Dayton citizens are aquiver with excitement on the eve of the trial of John Thomas Scopes for teaching evolution. Not that anybody has much interest in the actual cause at the bar, whether Mr. Scopes taught evolution in defiance of state law or in what happens to him. He is a mere figure over which will joust the forces of evolution and religion, of fundamentalism and modernism, of liberalism and conservatism. So he really wasn't that important. They just needed somebody, to take the court. But it's really about fundamentalism versus modernism, liberalism versus conservatism, Christianity versus non-Christianity. That's what it's about. On the side of liberal thought will be many educators, scientists, and lawyers headed by John R. Neal and by Clarence Darron, the brilliant agnostic. Okay, so on one side, you've got representation of the educators and the scientists and the lawyers, and opposed, you've got the single man, the single figure of William Jennings Bryan, who has placed himself as a leader of the fundamentalist at the head of the believers in revealed religion and the Bible, an avowed champion in holy causes. So that's how the trial started out. And I don't have a lot of time here. There was a carnival atmosphere there. And this was it brought a lot of people. Unfortunately, it didn't bring a lot of money to the town. The town did not benefit off of it financially the way that George Rapelia, the business owner, wanted it to. But let me just read this part right here where it explains about the town setting. It says, the courthouse where the famous case is to be tried was still being swept and cleaned and furnished today. One reaches it through a street lined with soda and sandwich stands with vendors of semi-religious books and sellers of watermelon. He goes on to talk about how it was like a festival, a small town festival. Had people out there selling watermelon, selling books, selling water. It was big time. Now this here article comes from the July 20th, which was next to the last day of the trial. And this is really important. It's like the first 3 or 4 paragraphs. I'm going to read it. I got to use this magnifying glass because I can't read it without it. Dayton, Tennessee, July 30th. July 20th. It was on the courthouse lawn where Judge Revolution had moved so that more persons could hear. There were so many people there, they had to move the court outside. Okay, it was not inside the courthouse. They had moved it outside in the lawn. And with the airplane whistling overhead, Mr. Darrow asked Mr. Bryan. Actually, William J. Bryan allowed himself to be put on the stand. That was kind of unusual because, he was defending the state, and he allowed himself to be put on the stand to be questioned by the agnostic attorney, Clarence Darron. I thought that was unusual. And says, when an airplane whistled overhead, Mr. Darron asked Mr. Bryan about Jonah and the whale, Joshua and the sun, where Cain got his wife, the flood and the Tower of Babel, until the youthful Attorney General Stewart, desperately trying to bring the performance within legal bounds, asked, "What is the meaning of all this argument?" And this is key right here. Clarence Darrow responded, "To show up fundamentalism," shouted Mr. Darrow, lifting his voice in one of his few moments of anger he showed, "to prevent bigots and ignoramus from controlling the education system of the United States." Mr. Bryan sprang to his feet, his face purple, shook his fist in the lowering, gnarled face of Mr. Darrow while he cried, "To protect the Word of God from the greatest atheist and agnostic in the United States." Sorry about that. The print's about the size of a gnat. I couldn't get it enlarged, so I had to try to use this. But that kind of well summed it up, because Barrow just said it pretty clear what it was about. It was about preventing ignorant people, who he refers to as the fundamental people, Christians, as ignorant, from them controlling the education system. And of course, upset William J. Bryan, who was a devout Christian. And he said, no, it's to prevent agnostic and atheist from controlling their education system. And wow, this has been long. It's almost 12 minutes. I'm sorry. I hope it's been entertaining enough for you to listen this long. But you know, we still have this same problem today. And Jesus had it back during his time. And I'll just bring this up real quick. You know, Jesus, at least it's not recorded anywhere in Scripture, never lost his patience with the common people. And it was the common people that William J. Bryan was representing. He never got angry with the common people. Who he got angry with was the religious crowd, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin. Jesus referred to them as sons of Satan, told them they were full of dead man's bones, told them they were liars, that their father was a liar. And even today, you know, I'm on Facebook a lot, and I have these same type of arguments or debates with people. You know, they look at me as, because I'm a Christian and I believe in creation, they look at me as ignorant, you know, and I'm constantly having to talk with people about that, creationism versus evolution. But anyway, man, we're approaching 13 minutes. I hope I don't get docked too bad. But anyway, I hope y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.